Ben, how are you doing today?
Hey, Jeremy, what's up?
I'm really excited to talk to you. For getting this right out of the way, we've been friends for, is it like 21 years?
Let's see, it's 2025, so probably 22 or 3 by now. Yeah, it's been a
It,
while.
it's been a little while. And obviously, our careers have gone down all sorts of different journeys and different paths. I'd like to go right to the beginning of yours if we can. And so, where'd you go to school? And what was the very first thing you came out of school to do?
So, first of all, thanks for having me, Jeremy. Yes, we've been friends for a long time, but that doesn't mean I don't get to say thank you. I went to school at Washington University in St. Louis, which I loved. Had a great time there. I was an economics major. And I always had this thing when I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be a pilot. I read all kinds of books about planes and I was super interested in aviation. And then the summer before my junior year, I did an internship with a law firm that was representing Continental Airlines because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And it was this big lawsuit, and I was basically an assistant paralegal for the summer. And I discovered that I really hated all this law stuff. I just thought it was boring as hell, and I didn't want to do that. But I met all these executives from the airlines, and I thought, well, that was cool. I thought the business part was cool. I thought the airline part was cool because I love aviation. And so after I graduated, or when I was approaching graduation, I reached out to one of the executives that I had met through the lawsuit, and I just emailed him cold and I said, "You may not remember me. I was the young kid working for the law firm." And he said, "I don't know what we have, but I'll introduce you to so-and-so." And the next thing I know, I had a job at Continental Airlines. So I was in their sort of grad training program. So I ended up moving back to Houston, where I'm originally from, because I got this job at Continental at the time when Gordon Bethune was running it. And it was sort of the best run airline in the country coming out of bankruptcy from what they call it from worst to first. And it was fantastic. And I was there for 5 years after school.
That's amazing. And I love that the sort of casual email to someone you met thing. I've heard of that story now quite a few times. And I can't emphasize enough for anyone who's on the younger side listening, like the value and power of a semi cold email can be amazing, especially for young people, right? Like, have you found that, have you had to do that again since? Has there been any other cold starts to anything you've done?
Well, no, because I learned a lesson out of that, which I've carried forward, which is, maintaining relationships is about the most important thing you can do in your career. And the right time to maintain relationships is when you don't need anything. So I have, since that experience, invested a lot of time in just periodically reaching out to people that I know that I like and trust, and I know like and trust me, and making sure that those relationships stay warm. Because when you do that, then when you do need something and you call, you're more than happy, because that's a friend.
Right.
And you're more than happy to help. So, that was one of those. I remember his name was Mark Drush, and I literally knew him probably because I drove him somewhere in a car or something. But we got to know each other a little bit, spending time in the car. And I just emailed him and I said, hey, I was the young kid on that lawsuit, and I really think it would be cool to work for an airline. Can you help? And he was more than happy to.
Do you find that maintaining those relationships is getting more challenging as you age, or easier? Are the tools making it easier for you? Like how
much easier. I mean, I sort of think of it like most people do with relationships. I think of it in rings. So there's an inner ring that whenever I'm in town where someone who's in that inner ring is, I call it, I make it a point to say, if I have one free moment, can we have a coffee? Can we have a drink? Can we have dinner? Can we catch up? Whatever. So that, there's probably 20 or so people who are in that sort of very inner ring. But then beyond that, with digital tools today, I mean, I will message people on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, I saw you did this. Congratulations." It doesn't take much. It's so little effort to send an email or send something over LinkedIn or comment on a post or something that just says, "Hey, I still see you."
Right.
And it takes so little. And for those of you, I have teenagers. They're always paying attention to who liked their post or who commented on their post. Grown-ups do it too. And so it just doesn't take much to be sort of the person who gives a crap.
I love that. One of my favorite little things to do on LinkedIn, since you brought that up, is when I have friends, especially I have a lot of colleagues who aren't super active LinkedIners, right? Like they change their job and that's their sort of post for the next 5 years, and then they do it again. And I love when I catch someone who's made a post on LinkedIn and it's only got like 4 likes, but there's someone I know well enough that I know they'll see, "Oh, Jeremy, you're right. It's almost like the most innocuous, least bit effort I could possibly do, and it still means something to people.
Of course. And also, like, do you just hit the congratulations button, or do you bother to put a little something that shows that you took more than half a second, you took 5 seconds? In today's world, that's actually quite a difference.
I either do the emoji or I write something. The only thing I do not do is the pre-written text, because I know someone before me clicked on the exact same text.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just do something that shows some effort.
Agreed.
It doesn't take much. And by the way, if you really like that person, you should enjoy, exerting the effort.
Exactly. I also tell people, like, 15 minutes a day on LinkedIn could be some of the, especially if you're not in need this second, but coming up. And I think the other thing you said that's really poignant is you got to nurture the relationships, because I just had someone reach out to me. I haven't talked to them in 4 years. I know why you're reaching out to me, pal. I know you're looking for a new gig or you need an intro to someone. It's fine. But I like when people are a little transparent. I like hey, Ben, I haven't caught up with you in 3 years. I'm really sorry. We're overdue. And I need to meet your friend, Jeremy. Can you hook us up?
Yeah, just be straight with people, because people want to be helpful. I mean, or by the way, they're a terrible contact anyway. So good contacts that you trust want to be helpful, but there's nothing wrong with also being transparent about it.
Totally agreed. All right. So you spent 5 years with Continental, and that was all in Texas?
It was all in Texas.
All right.
It was a great first job. I was in my 20s and I could fly for free. People used to walk through the office at like 3:00 on a Friday and be like, Vegas? Vegas? And we would go to the airport and get on a 6:00 flight. It was all standby, but it was in the 90s, so the flights weren't as full. And you could fly to Vegas. You'd leave at 6. You gained 2 hours, so a 3-hour flight, but you got there at 7. You'd have some dinner, go gamble, go get a drink, gamble a bit more, and then we'd go back to the airport and take the 1:30 red eye home.
It's awesome.
And you crashed the next day, but who cared? I was 23 years old,
Love those stories.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
From a personal perspective. And it was also, one of the other things I considered doing out of school was going to work for a consulting firm. I ended up not getting that job out of undergrad. I did end up obviously getting that. Well, not obviously, but we'll talk about it. I got that job after grad school. But I worked for a bunch of former consultants who were great operators. So it was kind of like as I will tell you with another one of my experiences, it was sort of like a postdoc experience from undergrad, where I had been an econ major, and it got me into the world of business, and I got to learn from these great mentors who were experts at what they did. And I had a great time. I loved it. And in fact, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I finally decided I really wanted to go back to business school, because I wanted to I liked my job, but I wanted to broaden my horizons and see what else is out there. And business school was a great way to do that. And I left in July of 2001. And we all know what happened to the airline industry in September of that year. So sometimes with timing in life, it's better to be lucky than good.
I think it's always true. I think lucky just sort of puts the icing on the cake, no matter what, whether good or not. What made you think about doing something different?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of things. One is, I always had it in my head that I wanted to go get an MBA. I just did. Really wanted to try working in a different part of the economy. I loved the airline industry. I thought it was cool, but I knew it wasn't the whole, it was just one slice of the world. And I wanted to see something different. I wanted, I was in my 20s. I wanted to try living somewhere else and doing something different. And business school was sort of an easy, low risk way to do that.
Sure.
Now, as I said, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I left July 2001, which was shortly before that whole industry took a beating in September. So the timing ended up working out really well from that perspective. And I also timed it reasonably well from a going to business school perspective, because obviously the kids who graduated in 2001 had a rough go of it. So, and right. 2002. So I had applied to a bunch of schools, and I got into Kellogg at Northwestern, and I went there.
And from there, you ended up next to BCG, if I recall.
I ended up at BCG. So like I said, I had interviewed with the consulting firms in undergrad, and I'd always thought it would be a good fit for me. And it turns out it was, and it wasn't.
Okay.
I went to BCG. BCG was definitely a postdoc from grad school, no question. I learned an invaluable toolkit there that I still use today. It's great training to be an executive and a professional. And I loved that. I just found, unlike most of my colleagues at BCG who had either been investment bankers or consultants before school, I really missed working for a company. So it wasn't a bad decision to go there. It was a good decision. I just really missed sort of owning stuff and decided I wanted to go back to the quote client side or, company side.
I've never been with one of the large consulting firms, but having been a consultant and run my own practice for a few years, that feeling of like, okay, I'm done telling other people what they ought to do with their thing. I want my thing.
Yeah. And I had come from that, so I missed it. Because by the time I left Continental, I had a team and I had something I owned, and because I did a number of jobs there. So I really missed that. And so, but that is when I made the only bad career move I ever made. Now it worked out fine, but it was the only, which is actually when I met you, which is when I left BCG to go work for the Gap.
So that's actually a really fascinating thing to learn on the fly here. So I met you at a career low.
You did.
Wow.
I mean, it was fine. I did well there. They it wasn't like a blow up from this isn't working out. But
what was the actual role you had?
So I should add, by the way, a lot of the work that I did when I was in consulting was in financial services. So I did consulting for banks and fintechs. And so that was sort of my specialty. And then the reason I ended up taking the job at the Gap is because I ran the credit card program for Banana Republic, which, was sort of like a financial services kind of job inside of an apparel retailer, right? So, and I also had a background in CRM from the airline days. So it was a really good fit coming out of consulting. Like they took one look at my resume and they were like, yeah, that guy. And I sort of jumped because I decided I wanted to go client side. And it was a director role, which most people a couple of years out of business school aren't getting. And so it was a big jump. And I just was like, great. Okay. Great reputable company, senior role, whatever. And I jumped. And the reason it was a mistake is not because it wasn't like a reasonable job. It's because I just don't care about clothes. I like when I wake up in the morning, like I go in my closet and I'm like, which color blue am I going to wear today? I just don't care. And I'm not saying that it's not being able to. So I'll say two things. One is as I said, I'm just not a clothing guy. I buy what's comfortable and convenient and conventional and easy because I don't want to have to decide. And that was part of it. And the second part was I just didn't have any passion for it at all.
So I want to double click on that. Like you started by explaining that you wanted to be a pilot one day. I agree, like passion's got to be present, but you more than me have always been very career minded. I want to do these kind of jobs and grow and have these kind of opportunities. So how much did the vertical really matter? Like, could you have done that job that you had at the Gap for Continental and loved it?
Much more, yeah. And I did a job, not quite that job, but a similar job when I had been at Continental or more junior level, which is why they liked me. So yes, and so let me see if I can sum it up with one story, which you may or may not have heard before. It was like my third day at the company, and I was technically my role rolled up to marketing. So we had sort of a marketing all hands. And they're showing us the fall campaign. And there's a bunch of yuppie looking people sitting around a fireplace, wearing sweaters with, the logo at the bottom. And the head of marketing says, now what we're going for here is this really warm, yummy sweater moment.
Okay. And
all I heard for the next hour after that was like the teacher from Charlie Brown, like, wah, 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 wah. I was like, I don't even know what that means. And P.S., the ability to both select an item that will to have an eye for what will sell and to be able to package that into an aesthetic look that will translate into those are all real skills that I don't have. I don't have, and I was never gonna have. I don't have a talent for it.
So how long did you stay?
Like 2.5 years, because I wanted to see it. I wanted to be able to say I delivered, and I did well, and they started thinking about me for other roles, and I finally was just like, you know what? To really move up here, I have to do the clothes part of the job. And I don't want to. I just don't want to.
Do you feel that you stayed because like I think about like our generation and younger generations, and I think the notion of loyalty is not out the window. I'm not throwing anyone under the bus here, but I do think that the amount of time you spend at the company, now we're seeing kids rotate through 18 to 24 months tops. Do you think that if you were younger, when you would hit that gig, you might have come and gone much, much faster? Or for you, were you doesn't matter if I start a thing, I got to get through some achievement?
Yeah. I mean, look, you and I are both Gen X, which was sort of in between. Like we weren't boomers where you had to stay for 10 years or you were a short timer, but we weren't millennials where, 14 months would cut it.
Right.
We were sort of in between. So in our generation, you didn't have to stay 5 or 10 years, or else. But if you stayed less than a couple years, you were a job hopper.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be a job hopper. Now but I'd only stayed at BCG for a couple years. And so I was like, I don't want to be a job hopper. So I want to stay a little longer. I was at my first job for 5 years. So I can show a little, I didn't want to be classified back at that point in time, unless you were at sort of like tech startups in the late 90s, where it was a new one every 8 months or whatever. Short of that, and particularly in financial services, which is where I wanted to be, if you were doing less than 2 years, you were a job hopper, and it wasn't a good label.
So one thing I'd love to do at this point, since you're about to talk about where your career takes you, you gave me once a very valuable exercise, the 3 to 5 things list, as I call it, which I, by the way, have passed on many times, giving you credit every time, though none of those people actually know.
Well, I give Barry Obrand credit because he's the guy who gave it to me.
Would you do a favor in a minute or less? So Ben introduced me to an exercise, and it's a way of thinking and sort of prioritizing and limiting yourself, but also pushing yourself a little to figure out what the heck you might really want.
Yeah, and it's particularly applicable to people like me and you and others who might be listening who can do lots of things, as opposed to people who sort of like, I'm a nurse and I do nursing. And so you're deciding about, now it's still applicable, but, particularly for people who can work for lots of different kind of companies or lots of different kinds of industries. I'm in my 6th industry. That's unusual. Basically, in a nutshell, you make a list, you draw a line down on a piece of paper and you make 2 lists. On the left, you write 3 to 5 things that your next job has to have. And on the right, you write 3 to 5 things that your next job can't have. And that's it. And there's only 3 rules. The first rule is no fewer than 3 and no more than 5, because it's too easy. The second rule is the stuff on the right can't be the opposite of the stuff on the left, because it's too easy. And the third and most important rule is that there are no other rules. So it's not what you would say in corporate speak in an interview. It's not sort of gobbledygook. It's real, honest, selfish, and I mean that word genuinely, selfish things that you want and don't want.
Well, you gave me one more thing. So the one rule you gave me in mine, which has become core to mine because I always say there's 4, is the last part. This is a private document. Don't show it to other people. Don't brainstorm it with your friends, because it's an opportunity to be really honest with yourself, right? If you want to fly first class around the world and be sent to important business dinners or whatever, and that's what you just genuinely want, put it on your damn list.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what I mean by no corporate speak. This is what you want. So I actually do tell people, show your significant other, or if you don't have a significant other, your best friend or your parent or someone you really trust, because it's going to...
I tell people not to show it to anyone. That way, if you want to write, I just want to make a lot of money, I don't care what I do, because most humans don't want to say that out loud.
Yeah, but right? That's my point, is like, if you can't tell, if there's no one in your life you can be that honest with, go deal with that. And I don't do that kind of podcast.
That's fair. Ben and I are not your therapists.
We are not therapists.
But I think you're getting the gist of it, right? It's like, be honest with it. Be really honest to yourself about it. I like the gut check with someone you really love and trust, but I think actually it still also works as a, like, just channel your inner selfishness.
Yes, there's no reason you can't be selfish when you make a list for yourself. You're just, pardon my French, that doesn't make you an asshole.
Right.
Like, it just makes you're spending some time on yourself. That doesn't mean you don't also go do nice things for other people.
So did you apply this or a similar exercise at this stage of your career?
It happened at a different stage. So further in the story is when I got that advice. So when I decided to leave the Gap, it actually worked quite easily, because a bunch of my former colleagues from BCG had gone to Barclays Global Investors, which some people may not have heard of. At the time, it was the largest asset manager in the world. They were right down the street in San Francisco. The COO was one of the partners I worked with most closely. And, I basically called him up and they said, you don't even need to interview, just come over here.
Wow.
So I went to BGI and I loved it. I was like, it was great because it was financial services and it was super intellectual and the problems were complicated. I did corporate strategy, and then I was the COO's chief of staff. I was helping run the firm. I was in the C-suite all the time. It was great. Loved it. Thought I was going to be there for 20 years. And then 2008 happened.
It's been less than 20.
Well, in 2008, Barclays was basically forced to raise capital by the FSA. And so they decided to sell the asset management arm, because asset management is earnings heavy, valuable, and capital light. So it was a way to sell something and retain and raise capital. And so we got put on the block. I spent a year working on the sort of deal side of it, helping sell the company. We sold to BlackRock. I then spent a year on the integration team, helping put the two companies together, sort of the transition management office, running the project of integrating the firms. I did that. So that was like a really long 2 years. I knew you then. It was like I was working all the time. It was pretty brutal. And at the end of it, BlackRock had a very different culture than BGI. I have a lot of respect for BlackRock, but it was a very different firm. And the roles that they offered me weren't roles I wanted. The roles I wanted weren't roles they were willing to offer me. And so we worked out a deal and I took a package.
Got it. And so that was your fourth industry per what you were.
That was my fourth. So I had been in airlines, consulting, retail, apparel, and asset management at that point.
And what happened next?
And then I was going to take some time off. My kids were very young, and I was going to take some time off. And one of the HR recruiting guys who had come through at BGI was still at BlackRock at the time. When I was leaving, said, I've got a couple of recruiters I can put you in touch with. I said, sure, I'm going to take the holidays off and then we'll see and whatever. And so he said, just meet this guy, David. And I went and met with David, who's a super nice guy. He's still my friend to this day. And he said, I got this thing for you. And I said, this was like, I want to say it was December 17th or something. So this is, it's right before Christmas. And my last official day wasn't even until January 3rd at BlackRock. And he said, I got this thing for you. This is out of left field, but I need you to talk to these guys. And I said, David, I'm about to go on vacation, but sure, when I get back. He's like, no. You got to meet these guys. It's really interesting, but it is in New York. And I'm like, I live in San Francisco. My kids are happy here. They're in school. My wife has a job. Like, we're not moving to New York. He goes, just trust me. Just go and talk to this insurance company. I'm like, insurance? Now the door's hitting me in the ass. I'm out of here. And he's like, no, they're different. You got to believe me. You got to believe me. And I was like, all right, I'll think about it. And then if you ever meet David, who lives in San Francisco, I'll introduce you. He's a force of nature. And he basically called me up 3 days later. He's like, so when are we setting this up? And I'm like, okay. And the next thing I know, and my wife, who was very good about it at the time, said, Ben, you haven't had an actual job interview since you graduated from I guess I had one when I joined the Gap, but she's like, it's been 5 or 6 years since you've had a job interview. Why don't you go do this? And at the very least, it's practice.
Sure.
Which I thought was really good advice.
Yeah.
And so January 3rd, I got on a plane and flew to New York, and I got on the plane and flew back. I met a bunch of people at Hiscox, which is the specialty insurance company I'm talking about. And by the time I landed in San Francisco, I had a voicemail saying, we want you to come back. The CEO is going to be in town. Will you come back? And I was like, okay. And then I thought, well, that's something I should do just anyway, because it's bad form not to. And I flew back. And by the time I landed in San Francisco again, I had a voicemail saying, we want your comp numbers. We want to talk about a deal. And then I don't have a job. I had a job offer in 3 weeks.
And what made you take it? You were at a point in your career where you could take your time and find whatever you want. You had planned to take some time off. And I'm curious, you don't strike me as super passionate about the insurance industry. So how did all these things come together to make this the thing?
Yeah. So Barry Obrand had given me that. I met with him. He worked for a private equity firm at the time in San Francisco, and he had given me the exercise to do in between that time period. So before I met David, I had done that exercise, and I was really clear about what I wanted. I wanted, one of the things on my list was, I wanted to stay in financial services because I really liked it, but I didn't limit it to asset management. And when I learned about, and I said, part of it was I want something I can be passionate about, but I wouldn't have been, but for what I learned about this company, which is what made me passionate about it. And then there were a number of other things. I wanted a general management type job. I wanted to lead a big group of people. There were things that were important to me on the list. It's hard to remember now, but basically, because what happens when you make that list is simultaneously two things, which is a bunch of stuff falls off and you don't waste your time on it because it's just not on the list.
Right.
And then when something fits the list really well, you present brilliantly for it because the reasons you want it are authentic, and authentic wins the day, any day of the week and twice on Sunday. So I think that's a big part of why I got the job.
I think that last part about how you light up, I think about that too. I've definitely done the interviews where for practice or for whatever, and you're like, you do a good job because you don't want anyone to think negatively of you. But then the ones show up where you're like, ooh, I want this. This is the, and you just bring more of yourself for those moments.
Yeah. And you sound excited because you are.
Right.
And you can't fake it. I tell people all the time, the most important thing in your career, other than just doing a good job, which is always important, is being authentic. humans have an unbelievably good bullshit-o-meter. I think it's sort of a lizard brain, caveman days kind of, response that is hardwired into us to just be super suspicious of anything that sounds inauthentic.
Yeah, I think that's very truthful. I think when we're like close to it, I think we actually let ourselves get fooled when it gets to sort of more murky or territories we don't necessarily understand or know. Like,
for sure.
We all of a sudden are like, oh yeah, no, I know a lot about self-driving cars now, or whatever the thing is. So you moved to New York. I know this quite well because it was I recall that part of our journey together.
Yeah, so I moved to New York. We moved at the time we had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. We moved to New York. I became COO of Hiscox USA, which was the US division of Hiscox, the specialty, which is a global specialty insurer based in London. I became the COO, and they told me at the time that this CEO of the division was likely going to be coming back to London. And so I would be a candidate for that job. And I was the COO for only a year. And then they made me CEO.
And what was that like for you? I mean, that was, it is sort of the natural evolution of a career like yours, but to actually have that moment hit, was this a checkbox? Was this a vision from the start?
I never knew if I'd be a CEO. What I wanted to do was be a general manager of a P&L at scale. Right. So, which I do now, even though I'm not the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon is, right? But I wanted to run a P&L at scale. And I was 37 years old and I had it. And that was unbelievable. And at the time, it was a really fun way to do it because I was sort of like not a startup, but a growth, sort of a growth company inside of a FTSE 250 company. Because the US had only started a few years before. And when I took it over, it was about $175 million in revenue and about 175 people. And over the course of the next 6 years, we grew it to 800 million and 500 people.
Wow.
Were
there any core tenets that from day one you brought you brought that beginning to bring that change about? Was there the Ben way of sorts, or did you just make smart decisions the whole way? Or
no, I mean,
the way along.
I think I did a pretty good job of setting the North Star of where we wanted to go, of making sure that we had the investment levels to be able to get there, and that we had the willingness to invest from the mothership, quote, so to speak. I mean, that was all lined up and ready to go.
And along this way, whether at Hiscox or today or even prior journeys, given the seniority of a lot of the roles you've had, is imposter syndrome a thing that goes through your brain from time to time?
Oh yeah, all the time. Anybody tells you they don't get it. This is one of the things
I like talking about. I have yet to find anybody who doesn't say it sometimes hits them. It just has to be.
Anybody, honestly, if it never hits you, you don't belong in leadership because you don't have enough humility in your body. If everything you ever get, if every step up you ever take is sort of comfortable and give me a break, I got this, then you don't have enough humility to be doing the job you're doing, because these jobs are hard. Leadership is hard. Leadership at scale is even harder. Accountability is hard. Making tough decisions is hard. If it's easy, everybody would do it.
And so how do you get better? Do you have mentors? What you read a blog post from time to time? What is your, at this level, what is your way of always improving Ben?
Yeah, I would say a few things. One is I read voraciously, and not just like, management books, but just all kinds of things, because I just try to get smarter. But whether I'm reading news from a variety of sources, whether I'm reading books, I mean, I just read a book about physics. Like I'll read a book about anything. I read a lot, and I try to just make myself smarter about the world in general. I have been lucky to work for some really inspirational executives and leaders who, and I view my responsibility in that as watching, learning, and emulating the parts of their behavior that I think are good and I can live authentically, not doing the things that I have seen in my career that I don't respect, and finding, for those things that I think are really cool but not very me, finding my own authentic way of doing that thing in a different way. And so putting those sort of things together is I think the way that it works, by the way, it's one of the reasons that I am so against generally work from home, because I think if I had not had the opportunity to observe so many CEOs in real life, I don't think I'd be as good at what I do. I just don't.
It is such a tough topical area right now because there's such the convenience and the logic around like, oh, well, you don't spend time commuting and you this and you that. And at the same time, it strips away everything else that's good about work.
Look, one of the observations, Jeremy, that I had during COVID was feeding my family is not the only reason that I work. It is
Right.
a really important reason that I work.
It's the Maslow,
Yeah, exactly. It's the base layer, but it's not, I work because I like intellectual challenge. I work because I'm passionate about what we do for our clients. P.S. I work because I like having a different social life in a different network and making friends at work. And so all of those things are important to me. And, so I personally think that richness goes away when for most jobs when you work at home. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have flexibility and all that stuff, but I would be, in my own view, for whatever skill I have at this, I would be a shadow of that if I didn't have all these years of being able to watch really talented people do what they do live.
I think that's really well said. It is one of my biggest, is chagrin the right word? I'm not sure about my current, and that's sort of the temporary now. But when we started building the startup, it was right in that post-pandemic era. It was like, great, we'll save money. Everybody will work from home. It'll be easy. And we were able to build culture and do a lot of things. But I will tell you, my friend, that if I had this exact startup and every one of us had been in the same office every day or 4 days a week, whatever, many of the mistakes I think we ended up making, we might not have made.
Yeah.
The ability to just sit down at a table together, and the trust that's built. What do you think, though, for young people who have not really seen why that matters, how to get them to accept RTO is not a terrible thing, or is that's just the way it is?
I mean, look, when you're young, and I would have put myself in this category when I was young, you think you know everything, and those old people, they don't know. So should the world adapt? Does every generation add something to the world? Of course it does. But do previous generations also have some wisdom that are worth considering? Maybe. And maybe occasionally. And maybe the right answer on a lot of things is a little bit of the blend of the two. So maybe we didn't have the flexibility thing quite right before, but maybe human interaction that's been going on for like 250,000 years has some value.
Could be. All right, let's get to this, the current book, the current chapter in the current book per se. So how long did you stay with Hiscox, and why did you make that switch?
So I was there for 10 years.
Was it really 10 years?
It was 10 years. Yeah. It was 10 years.
Okay.
In fact, just over. So I was there it was like 10 and a half. I was there for 10 years. So as you know, in 2018, I was asked to move to London and take over all the retail businesses globally. So I went from being CEO of just the US to CEO of retail in 10 or 12 countries around the world, which was another big milestone in my family. We moved to London and we were expats and all that stuff. I was at that time a candidate to be CEO of the company. That was very public, by the way. It was in the trade press and all that stuff because it's a public company. And there was another internal, one of my colleagues was also a candidate. We're still friends, so it's very amicable. And obviously COVID hit in the middle of all that. The firm went through, as many firms did, a crisis during COVID. We managed through it, but it was a tough time. It was fine. But one of the things we did do in 2020 after about 6 weeks of lockdown was move back to the US because we were all working from home and I didn't want to have my family be at home in a foreign country where they didn't have a support network. So we moved back in 2020. And then in 2021, the actual succession plan, which it was delayed for a year for obvious reasons, given COVID. And then that process started and I had actually interviewed with the board a couple of times, and out of the blue, I got a headhunter call for JP Morgan Chase. And I literally was like, I think you might have the wrong number. And they were like, nope, no, we meant to call you. And it was for the role that I have now, which is I'm CEO of Chase for Business, which is JP Morgan Chase's offering for small, our value proposition for small businesses across the country. And a big part of what I did at Hiscox, a big chunk of the kind of insurance I did was small business insurance. So I've now been in small business for 15 years. And they were looking for some outside talent, and they were looking for someone specifically who had a passion and an experience with small business. And I had an awful lot because I'd done it around the world. It was very similar in some ways to when I met the people at Hiscox. It was just like I took one call, and the next thing I know, I had another meeting, and then another meeting. And it was, remember, during that period in COVID, you could just do it from home because everybody was, it was all it was all on video conference because it was still sort of in heavy COVID mode. And so it didn't, I could still do my job and do that. I didn't have to take off work. I could just take a half-hour call here and there. And then the next thing I know, I have a job offer from JP Morgan Chase. And I had a long talk with my wife, and I decided there were a few things going on. One was the reality of being a publicly traded CEO. The CEO of a publicly traded company in Europe has its own sort of trade-offs that some people might find less than worth it.
Okay.
But equally as importantly, and by the way, I don't know if I would have gotten the job anyway. It might have gone to the person. I have no idea. And the other thing is we probably would have had to move back to London had I gotten that job. And this job was sort of in Midtown Manhattan, right on the train ride from my house. And it was this big scaled job at this great company with this great reputation and a runway beyond and a great sort of probably the number one talent brand in financial services writ large. And I was like, what do you think, honey? And she's like, I think you should do it. I'm like, so do I. And so I actually hadn't seen my boss, who I'm still very close with, the guy who was CEO at Hiscox. I hadn't seen him in a long time. I mean, it had been probably in person. It had probably been over a year because I moved back and we had been on, right. I mean, I talked to him every day, but it wasn't in person. And he was in town actually for the first time since COVID had hit. And we went to dinner and I told him.
That was difficult, or was it not so bad?
His reaction was exactly what you'd want from a mentor and a friend, which was, how could I tell you not to take that job?
I love when you hit a mentor or someone like that with I have news you're not going to like, but it's good for me. And the only reaction they give you is, oh my God, what an opportunity, or things like that. It's such a great feeling to have that, right?
Yeah. I mean, and he, like I said, we're still friends. He can totally understand why I took this job, particularly as an American whose family was happier in America. And, right. And it worked out really well. And it was actually quite an interesting transition period because I had to manage it because the other candidate got the job. And like I said, maybe he would have gotten it anyway. He's doing a great job. He's a great CEO of the company, and we're still friends. But we had to manage the whole process because, we didn't want to announce sort of Ben's leaving and then announce the other guy's CEO because that just looks weird. And I really wanted to set him up for success because I love the company. So we had to work out this whole thing. I had to wait to announce I was leaving so that the board could announce him as CEO. It was like a whole thing. And to their credit, JP Morgan was super accommodating, allowing that to all happen the right way. My boss here said, we would want someone to treat us that way, so we're going to treat someone else that way. So it was all very classy in every way. And I was, and I was worried about it because I knew it was going to be splashed all over the trade press and insurance because it's a known name, and it was. So I think we handled it really well.
That's great. That's great. Ben, I want to know something with this journey. How do you define success for yourself today?
Making an impact. And I would define making an impact in a broad way, which is making an impact on my clients, making an impact on my team, helping them find satisfaction, and particularly making an impact on the young people who are working their way up in the company. I just love being a leader and a mentor and hopefully occasionally inspiration for them because we have so many bright young people who work here who just pour their heart into the place. And I really like that. I also like, I like big, hairy, knotty problems. And, when you manage at this kind of scale, we have 7 million small business clients. When you manage at this kind of scale, you have that. So there's always something interesting and complicated to solve, which is a lot of fun. What else would I say? Yeah, it's much less about, I'm at a point in my career where I'm not motivated by the next job. I'm just not thinking about that. I may do another role here. I may not. It's not, we'll see what happens with that. But it's not, I don't sort of get up in the morning and say, like, how do I prove myself so I'm ready for the next job? I just want to do a great job.
How much would the Ben of today surprise Ben coming out of WashU as to where your career has taken you?
I didn't think I would end up in New York. That would surprise me. Okay. I don't think I'd be terribly surprised. I think I would I think I would look at the whole journey and be like, huh, that's a lot. Like
And the one,
5 cities and 6 industries, like that's a lot.
yeah, you've done quite a lot. The one last question, and I know the answer to it, but did you ever learn to fly?
I did. When I was 23 years old, I drove myself to the local airport and learned to fly, and then flew in my 20s recreationally. And then I'm not current right now, but a few years ago, I went back and did it for a few years and got my instrument rating. So I am I am an pilot.
Amazing. Ben, thank you so much for taking the time with me here today. I know you and I love your story personally, and I love being able to bring it out a little bit. If you want to send people somewhere where maybe it's a good cause, or to look something up, or to be inspired by something, where might you want the internet to go off and do a thing?
Sure. Check out the Paris Foundation. It's a woman named Tanya Paris runs it. It's up in Harlem. And she has built a STEM program. I guess it's STEAM now because, you have to have the A. But she's built a STEM program up in Harlem for kids who obviously come from challenging backgrounds. She grew up in Harlem, and she's created sort of this virtuous circle where kids she has an after school tutoring program in STEM. And when the kids graduate and end up getting jobs, they come back around and then they tutor in the program. So she's created sort of this circle within the community to help students find their way out of a cycle of poverty and have these opportunities through STEM education.
That's awesome. All right. One more time, the website for that?
The Paris Foundation, PARRIS Foundation.
All right. Thanks again, Ben. And I hope people listening got something great out of this, because Ben's story is obviously awesome. Lovely to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too.
Take care.